Hey everyone, it's Sam. I'm back on Instagram Live this evening, and today I am sharing with Candace. She's going to be hopping on in just a second here. We're going to be talking all about your second round interview. Hey Candace.
Hi.
Hey. Yeah, so today we're talking all about our second or third round interview. It all depends on the school in which you're interviewing with. It's that live teaching demo. Whew, that it is so just sounds really nerve wracking. And this is a part of the course that we talk about, and we give you lots of tips and strategies to really rock that live teaching demo, whether it's virtual or face to face. Probably this year it's going to be virtual for a lot of our candidates this year. So, Candace, before we jump into that second round or third round live demo interview, can you please share about your teaching story, and then we'll jump into some tips?
Sure. I guess I got into education about 15 years ago. And when I got in, I began as a sixth and seventh grade reading English language arts teacher. So I was at a middle school. I actually got into teaching in December. So I finished up my student teaching, got into teaching in December, and it was a class that had substitutes all year. They
Oh,
couldn't
wow.
have a teacher. So I was the first teacher that they had. And so it was an adventure, and I learned a ton. I went home crying probably the first month every day.
Oh,
Horrible, but I learned so much. And then so from there, I taught for about 6 years at the middle school level. I did sixth, seventh, and eighth grade reading, language arts, creative writing, all of the sort of that area. And then I got into administration, where I worked at a high school and a middle school and an elementary. I also, a couple of years back, I got back into teaching to get some special education experience. So I was able to teach a life skills class and a behavior unit for special education at the high school level. And so I have some experience with that as well. And yeah, it's been quite an adventure. I've gotten to be at all three different levels and gain experience and get to know kids and how they learn and things like that at all three levels. So, I know I'm still learning every day, but I certainly feel like I've learned so much, in my time as an educator.
I love that, Candace. And as you were talking, I was thinking about, oh my gosh, the way you are sharing your story and your journey is a great way for our teacher candidates to be thinking about their 30-second pitch, that question. Tell me a bit about yourself and how you talked about, I had experience with all three levels. I'm learning every day. I think those are great things to add into our 30-second pitch, usually a first round interview type question.
Yeah.
So tonight we're talking all about second round, third round live demo teaching interviews. And as you guys have questions, drop them on over in our Instagram live. We'll get to those at the end. I saw Stephanie dropped one already. Boop, boop. Thanks, Stephanie. So this live teaching demo comes after you apply for your job,
Mhm.
you submit your resume, your cover letter, you get your first round interview done. This is where you're teaching a live lesson, sometimes with students, sometimes with not. It depends on when that interview is. If school's in session, they might have you with students, or they might not have you with students. So let's talk about what can we expect in this teaching demo type interview, because you've been on the other side of that desk as the interviewer. So share some tips and strategies that our viewers can get today about that live demo.
Okay. The first thing I want to say is don't feel intimidated or defeated or like you're not doing a good job if the interviewers are not smiling. Because I think a lot of times they sit there with a straight face and people start to get really worried and anxious and nervous. And I think that's just sometimes how people sit and watch and retain, what they're watching. So don't let that throw you off. I think that's huge. You want to go in and be confident, know what you're doing, always be prepared, right? And I'm going to go through a couple of steps, but I want everyone to understand that you may or may not go into a room of smiling faces, or you may or may not be on a screen where people are staring at you with a big smile on their face. So it may not feel inviting or like you're doing a good job, but that doesn't mean that you're not. Just some people don't express themselves that way, and that's okay.
Right. Thank you for letting us know that.
Keep that in mind, because it can really throw off your confidence if you're in the middle of an interview and you see that people aren't smiling, and then you start thinking, oh my gosh, they don't like what I'm doing. I'm not doing a good job. And then that will throw your lesson off. So you really want to be conscious of that and just sort of keep that in the back of your mind. I would say if you're in a first round interview and you get invited to your second round, you want to learn as much about the context of that lesson as you can. So when you get that phone call or invitation for your second round, I would want to know, how many kids are in the class? Do we know exactly what the content is going to be? If you're going to usually be provided the subject area and the grade level, but are they going to give you the specific area that you're teaching, or is that something that you just come prepared with? So you really need to know exactly what the expectation is. I would also want to know, what is the background knowledge that the students have. So for example, if you're doing a lesson in reading a book, and this is for the younger students, you want to know, have you talked about comprehension? Have you talked about, say, inference? Because you don't want to throw inference questions into a lesson if they haven't covered that already. That's brand new content. So you really want to know what have they learned before leading up to this? Is it brand new? Is this something that you're in the middle of the lesson, or is this kind of the end of the lesson? So figure out that context of the lesson before you even start to do your lesson plans or anything. Okay. Once you know that, I would definitely make sure to have very clear, well-written lesson plans. You want to have those handy. Even as an 8-year teacher, I would always have my lesson plans. They may not have been as detailed in my first couple of years, but I always had my lesson plans there, because you do tend to, you can get into a conversation and lose track of what you're talking about, because kids have a way of getting you off topic, right? And so you really want to have that lesson plan handy so that you know where you're at. And I would also, just being at the elementary level, I've really learned this. Anything that you're doing, you need to have very clear step-by-step directions. So for example, if you're going to ask students to participate in an activity, you want to make sure that you have lined out the expectations for that activity before you engage in that. Because, especially if you're doing a first, second, third grade classroom, those kids are going to really need to know exactly what the expectation is before you jump into it. So step-by-step directions outlined. I would also say, and I hope I'm not going too fast here, but I would also say you really want to highlight that content objective for your students. So I think one of the best virtual teachers that I've ever seen was a pre-K teacher who had set up her, her sort of teaching area, and she had her board right here, and she had a visual of the goal of that particular class. And so with every word was a picture, and she would go over exactly what the goal of the class, and then she would say, and I will know that you are reaching this goal if you are. And then she would go in and explain exactly what it is that she expected to see. If you're listening with your ears, if you're doing the activity that we're doing, or whatever, if you're talking with your partner, if you're raising your hand to ask questions, whatever those expectations may be. I really think it's important that you highlight that for students before you jump in, so that they know exactly what the expectation is of that lesson. And then as pre-work, I'm thinking of all the pre-work, you really want to have a hook. You want to have a lesson hook, something that's engaging for your students. So, you know, if you're doing something, if you're reading a nonfiction text about sharks, maybe show a really cool discovery video of sharks and get them really engaged and interested in the topic that you're about to show so that they're all paying attention. So I would say as pre, I'm trying to think of anything else pre, that is the most important things to do as a beginning of the lesson. Okay.
Right. So I'm thinking for a virtual teaching demo interview, what are some things we need to have prepared for that interview so it goes well? I'm thinking, hold on one sec. Sorry about that, friends. So I'm thinking have your lesson plan like as a PDF to share that file with the interviewers so they can see and walk alongside you.
Yes.
Any links that you're sharing out, maybe have a little, like on your laptop, have a little sticky note of all the links that you're going to, so you can send that in chat, but also have them up like on your tab so that you're ready to share those. So you don't have to like, what's my password? Am I logged in here?
Mm-hmm.
You know,
exactly.
Make sure you have that good to go.
It popped up so that you can just click right over and go right to it.
Right. Yes. And I think it's really important to also ask, you know, which platform, that if it's a virtual interview, which platform they are using so you can get comfortable with it, sharing your screen and presenting in that way. Also understand which technology the kids use all the time, like Nearpod or Pear Deck or Jamboard. So you know, okay, if I put a Jamboard out there, the students have already used this before, and I can use this with my class. I just need to double check that I have the sharing on correctly, right? Yes.
Yes, exactly.
So, and these are things that you can ask before you go into that second round interview. Like, hey, what technology do you have access to? What types of technology can I use in this lesson that your students have used before? And I think those are totally appropriate questions to ask whenever you get that email or that invite, like, hey, come on back for a second round.
Yes, no, I think that's great. You want to know everything you can. Like I said, you know, you want to get as much about the context of the situation as you can so that you walk in and you are completely prepared. I mean,
Right.
And even little things like you're talking about the technology piece, turn off those notifications. You know,
yes.
Turn off your cell phone. Make sure you have a clear background. Or if you're going to, you know, have your goals or objectives posted, look in the camera and sort of look at what it looks like in a camera so that you can see
That's such a good idea.
Yeah, is it written big enough? Do I need to write in larger letters or not? And always print when you're doing a demo teaching. You don't ever write in cursive if you're writing anything handwritten, but print that text just for your students who need that accommodation there.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Any other tips or strategies for our live demo teaching? We talked about pre-work. We talked about understanding what's the context, the content, where are students at, where are they going in this lesson. Mm-hmm. I would also mention differentiated instruction. Where are the students in that way? Did you want to add more to that?
Yeah, and I would say, and that goes into a little bit of that prep work and those questions that you can ask, you know, am I teaching a class that will require some differentiation as far as extending the lesson or accommodating the lesson for my lower level students? What does that look like? Do I have ESL students? Mm-hmm. Students who, you know, need those ESL strategies to help bridge that gap between the languages. So all of those are important questions that you want to ask before so that when you're prepping your lesson, you can take that into consideration.
Right. And we go through all of these strategies more in depth in our course. You can find it over at theinterviewadvisor.com/get started. And you can find more. We go through the whole entire interview process, friends, from application all the way first round, second round, third round, resume tips, cover letter tips, job fairs. Oh my gosh, there's so much in there.
Yeah.
And this is just a very small sample of what you can find in that class.
Right. This is one class.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. So when we go for that teaching, we did our live demo. Do you have any, before I move on to after our live demo, do you have any tips, any more tips for during that live demo?
I would say it's super important. You really want to try and interact with the students as much as you can to kind of gauge their understanding of the content, because you don't want to teach something that's going straight over their head. They're not getting it, and
Right.
have that blank stare. So it's perfectly acceptable to ask questions. And when you do ask questions, really throw in those, how do you know that? Why do you think that? Why did you put that as your answer? That type of thing, because that, without having even planned for it, really elevates your lesson, into that justification, that evaluation. And then I would say, let's see, there was something else. Um, oh, uh, Anticipate student questions. So if
I
you
like
are,
that.
yeah, if you are teaching something, you want to kind of put yourself in the shoes of a student and think, okay, what questions may I have about this particular topic, and then have answers to those questions. You don't want to be stumped in the middle of a teaching demo, right? So make
Right.
sure you're thinking, anticipating questions, and you can even write those down in your lesson plan, those questions that you think they may ask, and think through what's a good answer for those questions. And make sure you're always speaking in kid-friendly language. Now, I do know this depends on the level that you're teaching, but you really want to take into consideration your audience, because you're not teaching the interview panel. You're teaching the
Right.
grade level, right? So you want to keep that in your mind. Okay, these are first grade students. This is not an interview panel that I'm teaching addition, so keep your audience into consideration when you are planning and delivering your lesson.
That is so important. Even if we are teaching to that interview panel, like if it's a summertime interview, you might teach to an interview panel a first grade lesson.
Exactly.
That is okay.
Yes.
Now, one important thing we talked about, you had shared about get a great hook to get those students interested in that lesson. We know that classroom management is built on relationships. So
Yes.
how do we get to know our students when this is a 40-minute lesson, we're done? How do we even start to get to know them in small little ways so we can make those connections during that live teaching interview?
That's a great question, and it's super important. I would just ask questions. You get to know people by asking questions. And so maybe your hook is a really great question that students can answer. If you're teaching something over the season, science. So what is the craziest thing that has happened to you in during the fall season, and why do you think that happened? Something that will engage them and get them talking, because as we talk about throughout the course, when you get people talking, it sort of, they're more engaged, right? And
Okay.
your brain just automatically starts to build rapport with that person if they're asking you questions, and you're answering things and you're talking about yourself. So you asking questions throughout the whole lesson, that's what I'm saying. Interact with those kids and
Yes.
really to gauge their understanding, but you can also interact with them to get to know them, to ask them, questions about what they like, what they dislike, and things like that. What way do you learn best? Or, what
Yeah.
do you already know about this topic? That's a great question to start with.
I love that.
Yeah, and that will really give you some great information about, where you can go with that lesson.
And I think another really easy tip for a live teaching demo is, as students are walking into that classroom or they're visiting virtually, introduce yourself, how you pronounce your name. Hi, my name is Mrs. Fessich. I'm really excited to be teaching your lesson today on addition. Let's get down to it. You want to be engaging and inviting and welcoming as well.
So, this is going to sound weird, but you want to be amazing. You want
Yes.
to be amazing with every person that you interact with at any point during that interview, from the secretary to the
Yes.
panel to the students. So it's all about showing your personality and smiling and not being monotone, and
Yeah.
really having some enthusiasm as you're teaching. So I couldn't agree more with you when you go in introduce yourself, tell them how excited you are, and really show that excitement through your facial expressions, your smile, your engagement throughout the lesson.
Yes. Yes. So important. So important. Candace, I have a 4-year-old knocking on the door over here, so I'm gonna have to wrap this up a little bit. Um, so, what are some tips you have for after we're done doing our live teaching demo? We know that our interview starts from the time we pull in that parking lot to the time we leave, right? What is one final tip that you have for us as we close out that interview, we're walking down the hall, we're getting into our car, what else can we do to make sure that we really rocked it?
So my very final tip for you would be, after you have completed your demo lesson, before you walk out, ask for feedback. It shows that you have a
Oh,
growth
I like
mindset.
that.
Yes. So what did you think about the lesson? Is there anything that maybe you would have added, or is there something that really stood out to you? Ask for feedback on the lesson, because when you ask for feedback, you're sort of also showing that you welcome feedback, and that's always the type of person that people want to work with.
And it shows you're collaborative too. You're willing to have
Yes,
that growth mindset like you had mentioned.
absolutely.
And we had one question tonight, so let me open that up. It's from Stephanie. She
Okay.
shares, how do you address your classroom management style? If that is a question you are given, how do you address your classroom management style?
So if we're talking about for the live teaching demo, you're sort of addressing that through your questioning, and you're sort of laying out those step-by-step directions. All of that is going to help with classroom management. When kids know what to expect, their behavior is going to be a lot better. When you engage them with that lesson hook, their behavior is going to be better. When you accommodate their needs, their likes, their interests, their behavior is going to be a lot better. If you are talking
Right.
about in a regular, like in a first round interview where they're just asking what's your classroom management style, just like you said, Sam, at the very beginning, everything boils down to relationships. So you
Yes.
build that classroom management by building relationships with kids, understanding their likes, their dislikes, their learning modes, and the things that interest them, so that when you're building your lessons, you take them into consideration, and those lessons accommodate the needs, the interests, the likes of the students. They're engaged and they're happy, hopefully.
They
That
are.
classroom management big time.
I love it. Thank you so much, Candace. And friends, if you are enjoying our conversation and you want more all about the teaching interview, you got to head on over to theinterviewadvisor.com/get started. That's where you can find our course where we walk you from where are the job postings, how do I even look for one, to application, to resume, to cover letter, first round interview questions, and how to answer them,
Yes,
which is gold.
exactly.
Second round interview, live teaching demo. We even talk about job fairs. I would say job interview, job fairs. We have, I don't know, this course is like jam packed with all kinds of
Digital
amazing.
portfolio.
Yes.
Down to what do you do before, during, after an interview? What
Yes.
do I wear? What do I take? All of those.
Yes. All the things.
Everything that's circling in your mind, we have it laid out for you, and a wonderful, amazing workbook that goes along with the course, that has
Yes.
all of the notes and everything you will need to guide you through the course and keep you on track.
Yes, and it is so comprehensive. I wish I had this when I was interviewing, because you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
So yeah, it's fantastic. It is a labor of love, and we are so happy to have it available for all of you. If you guys would like to check it out, over at theinterviewadvisor.com/get started. All right, Candace, it's been another awesome conversation. We have to get together another time. And if you guys have topics you'd like us to share about, please DM one of us, and we'll be happy to. Oh, yay! Stephanie got offered a job. Whoop, whoop, go, Stephanie. Yay. That's fantastic. Awesome. So if you guys have any topics you'd like us to discuss about job interviews, we are available, and we will be happy to share about that. You guys have a wonderful rest of your week, and relax, and we'll see you guys next week. Have a great day. Bye for now.